Let's design a ribbed worm to print a master so we can create a mold for soft plastics. We'll use a specialized workbench to repeat the ribs across the whole worm, and we'll make the design fully parametric so that we can change the size of the worm later if we want. We won't do any sketching in this video. We'll mainly spend our time in the Properties tab of the tree view. I'm starting here with a blank file. I'm in the Part workbench, and we're going to use the geometric primitives up here to drop a cylinder. Then I'm going to switch my view so that we're viewing it from the right. I'm going to use the 3 on the number pad to quickly jump to that view. And then I want to rotate this thing so that it is going the right direction. Now that we have our cylinder, let's rename this to worm. And let's set its radius to be 4 millimeters and its height to be 100, or about 4 inches long. So this is going to be our main body. Let's now drop a sphere. We'll rename this to head. And for this sphere that will be the head of the worm, we want to use the radius of the worm to make it parametric. So I'm going to come down here to sphere radius, click on the FX button. I'm in the expression editor. I'm going to start typing worm, and I'm going to choose that and type radius. Now that's going to exactly match our worm. And we're seeing half the sphere here because the origin is right here. And so that's just what we want. Let's copy that head, deselect the worm because I don't need another copy of that, and paste it and rename it the tail. So my radius is already set, but I do need to move that tail onto this side of the worm, and that's in the Y direction. So we'll go to the placement, the position, the Y, and here we'll use the worm's height or length. And when we do that, we have our tail. So our basic worm's already done. Let's go ahead and start creating the rib. That is also a geometric primitive up here, but it doesn't have an icon. We have to go to this button here to create the primitive and then choose it from the drop-down box. And I'm going to use an ellipsoid and say create and close the task window. And that ellipsoid is probably hiding in my worm right now. There it is. So let's go ahead and transform that and stand it up. And then we'll set its properties. And an ellipsoid has 3 properties, or 3 radius properties rather. This first radius I'm just going to set to 1. That's going to make it 2 millimeters thick this way. These other 2 radiuses, let's just set them so you can see how they work. If I set that one to 10, I get wide that direction. And if I set this one to say 30, I'll get wide the other direction. Now both of these radiuses are going to have the same expression. We want to use the radius of the worm, but then we want to add 2 millimeters so that our ribs stick out from the worm. I'll go ahead and copy that, put it on my clipboard, say OK, and then I will set radius 3 to be the exact same thing. Okay, we have our rib. Right? We have our worm. The only thing that's left to do is repeat this rib. And for that, we'll be using a specialized workbench called Lattice 2. If you don't have that already installed, you go to Tools, Add-on Manager, say OK, and when it loads up, you're just going to go to the search bar and type Lattice 2. And this is what it looks like. Mine's already installed, so I will close this. When you install it, FreeCAD will ask to restart, so don't forget to save your file first. In fact, let me do that now. So the ellipsoid dimensions are set, and we want to place it using that Lattice 2. Let's go up to the workbench selector, choose Lattice 2. The first thing we need to do is drop an array. And the array we're going to be using comes from this icon right here. It's 3 kites with a little star. Click on the drop down, and you want to choose span step. This has to do with how the kites are arranged. And when you do that, you see these kites fall onto my screen, but they're going this direction, and I want them to go along with the worm. So I'm going to go ahead and transform the array and just rotate it until it aligns with the worm. Now, let's hide the worm so we can see the kites. And let's go ahead and repeat our object. To do that, first select the ellipsoid, then Control select the linear array. Then come up here and find this icon that looks like a box and a kite, and it has a drop down, and it says populate with copies. And when you do that, you're going to get copies of that ellipsoid along those kites. Now, these copies didn't go the direction I wanted. So I need to rotate this ellipsoid around 90 degrees this way. So let's go ahead and do that now. And it looks like we need to go around this axis and say OK. And we can hide the original ellipsoid and just look at the copies here. Now that we've dropped this populate linear array object, it is actually controlled still by the linear array properties themselves. So click on the linear array, come down to the data tab, scroll to the bottom. For the span end, it's right now ending at 50 millimeters. Let's go ahead and tie that to the length of our worm, which is actually a height property. And now that has brought our ribs all the way down, but I want more of them. The way to fix that is to go down to the properties in the linear array. Under span end, there's a step. And for this step, I want to use another formula. Here, I'm going to use the radius of the ellipsoid, the small radius or the thickness, which was radius 1. And if I just say OK here, I'm going to get all of these objects touching each other and overlapping each other. So then I'm going to multiply that by 3. And that's going to give me some spacing and say OK. It'll take a second to refresh here. And once it's refreshed, you can see all of our ribs. Let's go ahead and hide the kites or the linear array and bring back the worm so we can see our finished creation. We're basically done at this point with the technique. But unless you have an injection mold system for soft plastic, this is going to be very hard to pour. Let's create a top pour mold so that anybody could just use it, right? And to do that, what we're going to do is cut the top of this worm off. And we'll go back to the part workbench to do that. Here, we will drop a cube. And let's just orient my drawing so you can see what's going on. Now we need to make this cube long enough and wide enough to cut the top of this off. And we're going to do that just a little bit at a time, and we're going to keep it fully parametric. So let's go to the cube, and let's first play with its width. And this is called width, but it's actually going to be the length of our worm, and that just has to do with our orientation. Go to the expression editor. Here, we're going to say the worm.height, and that'll give us the 100 millimeters, but we also need to encompass the head and the tail to cut those as well. So I'm going to say plus worm.radius times 2, because there's 2 of them. And then I'm going to add 20 millimeters. And that's going to make my cube longer than my object. When I do that, you'll see what's happened. The longer end is hanging off over here. And so to fix that, we want to move this cube in the Y direction. So if you go to the cube, go to its placement and its position, and go to the Y, here we're going to say negative worm.radius, which is going to back us up to the beginning of the head. And then we're going to subtract 10 millimeters so that we go back and overlap so we get a clean cut. And when we do that, you'll see that we've moved like this. So let's go back to the front view. and see where we're at. We're there, but now we need to set the width and the placement. In order to do that, we will go to the length, and we will set this to the radius. And we'll multiply that by 2 because we want the full width or the diameter, right? And then again, we'll add 20 millimeters and say OK. And you can see our cube is over here, and we just need to center it. And we need to center it along the x-axis if you look down here at the navigator. So again, back to placement, position, x. And here, we're just going to use a formula that refers to this length property. So we'll say minus length divided by 2. And that will center that cube up that direction. So our cube's perfectly centered, and it's cutting off half of our worm. We don't want that. We want to cut off just a little bit from the top. So let's move this cube now in the Z direction. And we'll do that under placement position. Here we'll say worm radius. And let's just subtract 1 millimeter. As you print this and play with your mold, you may have to mess with that number. So now we're just intersecting the top part. There's only one thing left to do. Let's take our worm, our head, our tail, and this populate object and create a fusion. Let's take the fusion now and then Control select the cube and perform a cut. And now you can see we have our top pore worm. So let's play with the parameters now, because the reason we entered all of those formulas instead of just dropping a cylinder and typing in a number and dropping a sphere and typing in a number was so that we could easily change this. And you notice everything was based around the size of that worm itself. So if we go here in the tree view and find that worm and go down to its data, I could make it much fatter. Let's just change this to 11. And it'll take just a second to refresh because of all of those ribs and the calculations that FreeCAD has to do. And there we have a very fat worm that's still 4 inches long. If we wanted to make it longer, same difference, come down here to the height and make it say 250 millimeters long. If I scroll out a little bit here, you can see that now. I won't get into creating a mold from this master, but basically you're going to print it out, make a mold using silicone. There's plenty of videos here on YouTube that show how to do that. And then you can pour your soft plastic into that silicone mold. Good luck. Take your worm out there on the water, and I bet within a minute or 5, you're going to be catching a really cool fish like this one here.